Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Lawmakers in Australia are on the cusp of a first-of-its-kind agreement with that nation's Aboriginal people. The treaty is heralded as a major step toward healing and reconciliation. It also ushers in a new chapter of government relations in which Indigenous people have more of an official voice in the policies that affect them. The creators of the agreement look to federal treaties with Native Americans to inform them about what to include and what to avoid. We'll talk more about it after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Some tribal leaders are supporting a proposed bill that could expand sports betting in Wisconsin. Chuck Quirmbach has more.
About 36 states allow some form of sports betting, but in Wisconsin, the only legal way to place a wager on a sporting event is at some tribal casinos. Proposed legislation would allow Wisconsin tribes to operate computer servers and other technology so that sports gamblers could be anywhere in the state and place a bet online. Jeff Crawford is Attorney General of the Forest County Potawatomi. He told a legislative hearing that allowing tribes to offer more sports betting would encourage gamblers to turn away from using illegal and unreliable offshore betting firms.
While online gaming is currently at the Wild West in Wisconsin with no regulations or protections for consumers, it does not have to be.
Kyle White Eagle is a tribal legislator for the Ho-Chunk Nation. He says his tribe provides a lot of services across a wide geographic area and needs additional gaming revenue to better tackle problems like poverty and opioid addiction.
Giving tribes in Wisconsin the right to conduct mobile sports betting isn't going to solve these problems completely, but it will help significantly and it will be funding well spent.
But a coalition of national commercial sports gambling firms, including DraftKings and FanDuel, opposes the Wisconsin bill. Attorney Damon Stewart of the Sports Betting Alliance says gamblers would lose out if legally they could only go through the tribes.
Unfortunately, this bill will not result in a competitive market for online sports betting that provides consumers with choice.
If the mobile sports betting bill passes in Wisconsin, it would still take time for the state to renegotiate gaming compacts with the tribes and for the U.S. Interior Department to approve the gaming expansion. For National Native News, I'm Chuck Quirmbach.
An Arizona tribe is giving its members some financial relief as the federal government shutdown continues, impacting programs like food assistance. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrozio reports.
The Gila River Indian community is calling them general welfare payments, one-time $1,000 disbursements for each 18-year-old tribal member, regardless of whether they're a SNAP recipient. That decision came on Saturday during a special council session called by Governor Stephen Roe Lewis.
I hope that this payment brings some peace of mind during this time of uncertainty at the federal level.
Lewis urges his tribe south of Phoenix to plan for the long haul.
So please, use or set aside for your food needs, to pay bills, and to add some measure of economic security.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrozio.
The chairman of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina says he's confident that this year full services and benefits will be extended to his tribe. Chairman John Lowry made the remarks Wednesday during a legislative hearing on the Lumbee Fairness Act, which would grant the tribe federal recognition. Lowry says his tribe has long sought federal status.
I'm a descendant of Solomon Locklear Sr., one of the 44 tribal leaders who in 1888 petitioned Congress to recognize the Lumbee tribe. Today, 137 years later, I stand before you once again to advocate for justice and equal treatment through full federal recognition.
Wednesday's hearing in the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs included opposition. Leaders from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians of North Carolina and the Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma testified against the bill, while Lowry submitted a list of tribal support and testified that nearly all of North Carolina's congressional delegation backs the bill. President Trump, in a statement this week, issued his support for the Lumbee tribe. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by AARP, whose Family Caregiver Resource Guide is available to caregivers by calling 877-333-5885 or at aarp.org/caregiver-resources.
Kaufman & Associates is a Native-owned and led consulting firm supporting Native communities with culturally grounded solutions to shape Indigenous futures. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Australia is poised to make history with the country's first treaty that charts a path for more inclusive participation by Aboriginal people in the laws and policies in the state of Victoria. Supporters of the agreement, that has already passed both houses of Parliament, say it is a long overdue action toward healing and reconciliation. It is the first such treaty in Australia and comes after years of research, negotiation, and a failed public referendum in 2023. The language in the treaty reflects, among other details, a recognition of how treaties worked and didn't work when it comes to Native Americans and federal government. Today we'll hear from those who worked to make the treaty happen and what their hopes and concerns are following this historic action. Listeners, you can join us today with your questions or comments by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Our first guest joins us now from Boston, Massachusetts, Dr. Nikki Moody. She is a professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Melbourne. Nikki, welcome to Native America Calling. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and please tell us what tribes you are from.
Yama Malaya, that's hello friends in the Gamilaroi language of my mother's people. I'm a proud Gomeroi woman from the state of New South Wales in Australia, and I'm joining you today from the lands of the Massachusetts people.
Wonderful. Nikki, supporters of the treaty, they celebrate this expanded voice that it will give Aboriginal peoples in the state government. Can you help us understand how it accomplishes this more than what is already currently available?
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. I think the important thing to know about the Australian context is that it is a really low rights environment. We have very little legal protections, nothing in the Constitution. There is very little legislation that enshrines rights that are really taken for granted, I think, in many other parts of the world, including the US. The right to self-determination, for example, is not really something that exists in Australia. So what this legislation is doing is pushing forward into really new territory for us. It enshrines the right to tell the truth. It enshrines the right to self-determination. It enshrines a whole range of new relationships between First Peoples and the Victorian government. It's astonishing, really, the kinds of scope that this treaty gives us, and is simply the result of decades of hard work and activism by families and communities from Victoria. It's really quite a momentous occasion to see and to be a part of.
Now, there are measures in the treaty that chart a path for reconciliation. Tell us more. What are those measures?
So the treaty legislation itself kind of creates three parts to it. It has a parliamentary structure, it has an independent monitor, kind of an evaluation arm to it, and it creates a mechanism for local truth-telling processes. So the approach to reconciliation that we're seeing in this treaty legislation is one that is a genuine hand out to non-Indigenous people to walk with Aboriginal Victorians into a future that really has been so long coming. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but the approach to reconciliation is really being bedded down in elementary and middle school curriculum, the equivalent that we have in Australia. into really local mechanisms, into all levels of government in the state, into different government departments. It's really an extensive approach to what reconciliation is and what it could be in the future.
And how large is that need to acknowledge reconciliation in this formal legal document?
Look, reconciliation is a really tricky idea, right? Like, a lot of people want reconciliation to be the basis on which we come together to understand something new for ourselves, a new type of relationship that recognizes the really profound harms and trauma that has really been a part of Australia's founding, part of the invasion and the settlement of Australia was, as it was in so many places, a really profoundly violent period of time. And a lot of that violence continues today in different forms. And so recognizing that this colonial harm and this colonial trauma continues in so many ways today, but that we have the answer to that. We know what heals that harm. We know how well First Nations do when we have the right to self-determination, and to be able to see a practical treaty with practical outcomes really at its heart, I think is something quite remarkable for Australia.
Education, a major part of the reconciliation work that has been happening. Where will citizens of Victoria first see that educational component surface?
It's really incredible to see this proposed change to the state school curriculum in Victoria. So everyone from the first years of high school through to about year 10 of schooling will start to see different parts of Australia's true history being taught in their classrooms, to have the opportunity to learn, to understand more about the oldest continuous living culture in the world and what that means, the activism and strength of Victorian Aboriginal people really is something that is really a light for a lot of Australia to look towards what those families and communities have achieved. So the idea about what it is that our young people are going to be learning, what is the knowledge that they're going to be able to then take with them into their adult lives, to their families, to their jobs, into the future, is really going to start seeing, I hope, a quite remarkable change in the way that people understand what it is that First Nations have the right to be able to do. What are we passionate about? What do we care about? And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's a better, more ethical, more just, hopeful relationship for a future that's more sustainable for everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. I want to bring another guest into our conversation now, Al Fricker. He is a lecturer in the Nakiri Institute of the Faculty of Arts and Education at Deakin University. He joins us from Melbourne, Australia. Al, welcome to the show. Good morning. And please tell us what tribe you are from.
Thanks so much, Sean, for having me. So my mob are the Judge Alwarang mob. So we come from the Central Goldfields region in Victoria.
Wonderful. Al, the educational work that we just heard Nikki describe, what all will it take to incorporate this into the education system there in Victoria and perhaps elsewhere in Australia as well?
So I think, broadly speaking, the work will be certainly something that's going to have to be a reform, a significant reform to the curriculum primarily, so that we can build in the important truth, especially around Australian history, and also seek to embed more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander content and contexts across the wider disciplines. So we're talking things like literacy, numeracy, STEM, fine arts, and the rest. And I think also it's going to involve some significant undertakings from the State Department of Education and the teachers' unions to support educators to actually become far more confident and competent in this space to engage with these same knowledges appropriately and effectively with their students.
All right. Now, this treaty, Dr. Fricker, it only applies in the state of Victoria. What is the potential for it to influence decisions elsewhere, though?
I think it's pretty clear that the other states and territories and the federal government in Australia are sort of watching this space quite significantly. And I think it's very much a wait and see. I think what we have a great opportunity to do in Victoria is to essentially demonstrate that this is not a process where we're taking away from anybody. And in fact, what we're actually able to do are establish really important relationships with the government that will not only support better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in schools and communities more broadly, but we actually create a really wonderful example of how this sort of work can actually benefit every single citizen, regardless of their cultural context as well.
All right. Thank you. Nikki, back to you. What barriers remain now going forward?
Oh, Sean, well, you ask an interesting question. I think, as Dr. Fricker mentioned, there is a really significant challenge in figuring out what is the nature of training and professional learning that needs to happen for not just teachers in schools, but for school leaders, for parents who are involved in the change that's going to happen in schools, but also to the broader professional workforce, because whilst these changes are taking place, professional learning for teachers is rolling out, we also have new training opportunities and new standards of cultural competency and principles of reconciliation and treaty being rolled out amongst public servants as well. So the kind of investment in uplift, the kind of investment in new knowledge, how do we bring people together to really understand what this means for our day-to-day working lives is really going to be quite a significant change. But the state government has demonstrated its good intentions in this space, and I think that we can only see good things, but there are significant challenges in the resourcing and in holding the state to account in a really genuine commitment to doing this in a way that really provides people the opportunity to make sense of what this means for them as professionals working in schools or working in government departments.
Australia, poised to make history with the country's first treaty that charts a path for more inclusive participation by Aboriginal people. Phone lines are open for listeners who would like to join this conversation, 1-800-996-2848, and we have more guests to talk with on the other side of this break. The Inuit throat-singing duo Pilk Silk's new album, Legends, is a soundtrack for the cultural stories they absorbed growing up on the Canadian tundra. Country crooner Blaine Bailey's new album, Indian Country, invokes dive bars, dusty roads, and rural living. And First Nations R&B singer Love is embracing maturity with a soulful twist. They're all on our Native playlist on the next Native America Calling.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, gift shop discounts, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show.
You're listening to Native America Calling. We're talking about a promising agreement to benefit the Aboriginal and Indigenous Torres Strait Islander peoples in the state of Victoria, Australia. It's the country's first treaty with Indigenous people, and it could be a model for the rest of the country and beyond. You can join our conversation today. Just give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Our next guest joins us from Victoria, Travis Lovett. He is the inaugural executive director of the Centre for Truth-Telling and Dialogue at the University of Melbourne. Travis, welcome to NACDU. Good morning, and please share with us what tribes you are from.
Latalama latun lat linyung Travis Lovett Kedama Gunjamar meeting Linian Kokon Ken Konatedek Bujbim Yumbin meeting or Andrew Ma meeting cool and meeting Nian Katabanjol Wangwa Ma Wu Rang Book Bidong Beauty meeting. I just acknowledge I'm a proud Kirrabamara Gunditjmara man. My name is Travis Lovett. So Gunditjmara country is down, people may know, in Portland, not in the States obviously, but in Victoria. And pleasure to be here today, and pleasure to be able to join all the special and deadly guests on the segment here too.
Well, Travis, that is one
It's really
beautiful
important.
language.
One other point, sorry. It's really important that we also share language,
Sure.
And I guess yourself and your listeners will appreciate that. And, for the ancestors that we've lost along the way, their fight, their struggle, and their resistance meant something. And that's why I choose to continue to, I guess, learn language, but also share language with our people, but also non-Aboriginal people as well. It's that resistance. I think we are a resistant people, all First Peoples right across the world, but and we're also known as a fighting Gunditjmara, which I'm sure maybe other guests will have something to say about. But really proud about that. Sorry, I cut you off.
Hey, no worries. I think I speak for all of our listeners when I tell you just how beautiful that language you speak is. Deadly, as you put it. Travis,
No.
tell me, what role does truth-telling play in how this treaty will be honored once it's signed and into the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, truth telling was the core foundation to why we have this treaty in the state of Victoria. We had a Yuruk Justice Commission, and Yuruk is the Wamba Wamba word for truth. And I was fortunate enough to be the deputy chair of that commission. We did have royal commission powers, but primarily we were a truth-telling commission where we encouraged our people to come forward to share their truths and their lived experience. We really have to be definitive about that word lived experience, because I don't use the word stories. Their stories is an important, I guess, part of our culture. And I didn't want particularly non-Aboriginal people to get caught up in they're just stories about all the traumas we've been through. Well, no, it's a lived experience. Colonisation happened in the state of Victoria 191 years ago with the arrival of the Henties. So there was a lot of massacring of our people. I hope I can say that online, but I mean that with also with no disrespect, because we have had one of the swiftest, eradications of our people and our cultures attempted on that through early colonial processes, and quantified, I guess, by non-Aboriginal also historians as well, about how country was taken primarily in Victoria, but it happened right across Australia, and I want to be really clear about that. But telling the true history and now people having a process to be able to come forward and share their truths and their lived experiences with the state was the quantification as well. We also encouraged non-Aboriginal people at a point in time throughout this 4-year commission, but we inquired into areas such as health, housing, education, criminal justice, child protection, land, sky, water, economic prosperity, political life, access to records and sovereignty, a few other things. That was one of the broadest ever terms of reference that a Royal Commission has undertaken. And I don't really hang on the words of the Royal Commission, because it is awkward as a First Peoples person to be appointed by the King to do work that ultimately, led their family leading to the depths of the traumas that our people have been through. But I think it was really important that we did have those powers to be able to hold government to account, to be able to extract more than 10,000 documents from the state government here of Victoria. And the principle that your listeners, I guess, would already appreciate anyway, but government knew the whole time about the historical and the contemporary traumas that our people experienced, because it was all government policy.
Okay.
Whether it was rounding our people up onto missions. Sorry, I do talk a lot.
Hey,
got a lot
no
to say, brother.
worries. Well, Travis, we heard Nikki and Al both talk earlier about education. What do you think reform looks like in the university setting, and does the treaty bill affect university education?
100%. We made recommendations for the university at the Yuruk Justice Commission, the universities right across the state, to be able to change and transform. And it's a whole heap of areas, really. It's curriculum reform. It's accountability. It's about being more accountable. Dr. Nikki Moody talked about accountability mechanism back to government. I don't know what's happening there. Accountability mechanism, back to government. And it's also about repatriations of our people. We made recommendations around bringing our people and our ancestors home, right across the world. We're spread throughout museums and so forth as well. But universities have a pivotal role around creating social change, social license, and embedding the true history around what's really happened here in the state of Victoria. And I say these points as well. We're not here to blame people, everyday Australians, about what's happened to our people, but we are asking for institutional accountability for what the harm that's been done. Also, universities right across the world, particularly in Australia, doing their own truth telling and having a deep look at themselves. A lot of the universities of Melbourne's, infrastructure was founded on the basis of my people's lands in Gunditjmara people, but then obviously spread throughout when they've created campuses and so forth in other locations. And I guess in Melbourne, it's on Wurundjeri, Wurrung country, and there's other facilities there. So doing deep dives into their own, role in that colonial process as well. There's so many different facets. It's how corporate services are run. What does reparations and redress look like? We made recommendations to the state government about what that looks like. So institutions also need to take a really good look at themselves about what are they doing to give back, to enable, to also help our societies heal. I think both people before talked about healing. We want to heal as a people. We truly do. And we've said for 200 years plus that we want to walk beside non-Aboriginal people to get the job done, but it needs to be based on the true history, the true lived experience of First Peoples. And it's not just the historical traumas, as we've discussed at the UDUC and as we highlighted through truth-telling as well.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Really appreciate all the insights you can add to this conversation. Let's bring another guest in now. Also in Victoria, this is Lydia Thorpe. She is an independent senator for Victoria and represents the Black Sovereign Movement. Senator Thorpe, good morning. Welcome to our show. And please share what tribes you're from.
Good morning, Sean, and thank you for having me. I'm Gunai Gunditjmara and Djaparang woman, grandmother, mother, and I live and work on Wurundjeri country.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Now, the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria played a major part in getting this treaty written and both approved. How will its role change now?
Well, it's now up to traditional owners on their own country to start shaping what treaty looks like for them. There are a number of clans and nations around what is now called Victoria that need to participate in this process in a way that brings justice to their land, their waters, their people, and the state treaty is about ensuring that those nations have a say now. It's the Assembly's been, representative of a portion of what is now called Victoria. And I think by going out now and having traditional owners self-determine their own destinies is just as important as the treaty itself.
Senator, you opposed the Voice to Parliament referendum in 2023 for a constitutional amendment giving a voice to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in parliamentary decisions. How is the treaty bill now different?
Well, throughout in fact, before the referendum on the voice, during the referendum on the voice, I always demanded that truth-telling come first, because we do live in a racist country here in so-called lucky Australia, where people don't know the true history of this country. And thanks to Brother Boy Travis for his work on the URUK Commission, which was all about truth-telling. But to go to a voice referendum and ask the whole country to do something for Aboriginal people in this country was always going to end badly when it's such a racist colony that we are all in right now. So truth-telling must come first, then treaty. Treaty is about bringing this nation together, treaty is about maturing as a nation, and then constitutionally we could enshrine treaties so that they can't be broken or they can't be at the whim of who's in government. Enshrine the treaty so that it's protected for future generations. So that's why I oppose the voice. The voice was never going to give us any power or any real say in any government. So this is a really good step that Victorian Aboriginal traditional owners have taken. And I believe that they've gone through the proper process, because it has to start with truth telling. And we've seen right now, even through the treaty in Victoria, that there has been a rise in racism. We've had a rise in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people calling 13 Yarn, which is a program or a phone number that you can call for support around, mental health and just general support from other Aboriginal people. And that's because of the rise in racism. So
Okay.
we've got to deal with that part of the process going forward. And
Okay.
truth telling is certainly a way to do that.
Senator, I want to ask you more about the treaty bill, but before I do that, you've repeatedly mentioned the racism that exists there in Australia. Other guests have mentioned it as well. And I think a lot of our listeners here in the States will relate to that. But it would help if you would give me some examples, some specific examples of just how extreme this racism that you folks experience there in your country is.
Well, we have currently neo-Nazis roaming the streets calling for a white Australia. They are committing serious violence towards Aboriginal people. We have a sacred site, in fact, a burial site where the neo-Nazis stormed in and assaulted people, assaulted Aboriginal mothers, and stomped on the Aboriginal flag. We have just recently a political party being formed called the White Australia Party. Now, the White Australia policy caused a lot of harm to our people and anyone who wasn't white in this country. So racism is rife, it's violent, and the rise of neo-Nazis in this country is frightening.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of our listeners here in the States can relate to what you're describing, Senator. Back to the treaty bill now. What was the opposition like to the bill? And do you have any concerns on the treaty maybe not being signed or perhaps broken in the future?
Well, unfortunately, we have a coalition of Conservatives, Liberal Party, and the National Party who form a coalition here in this country who don't understand treaty and have a process of fear mongering out there to the wider public that we're going to somehow take people's backyards, and that the white people of this country are going to lose something as a result of treaty. They have no understanding, and the coalition members that I've spoken to at the federal level, when you sit down and have a proper yarn, a conversation, they are open to learning more about treaty rather than shutting it down immediately. So I think with the Labor government taking this as a win for them and owning treaty in this state is a problem. It needs to be owned by our people, for our people, rather than any government, patting themselves on the back, if you like, and taking it as a win, because you'll always have the opposition coming hard at any government that tries to take ownership of some historic moment like we've seen here. And they have threatened to cancel the treaty if they get in at the next election, which is in 2 years. So we've got to work really hard right now to educate these people on the importance of treaty and how that can heal them, this land, this water, the air that we breathe, and every community around Victoria and around the country can be a part of a treaty.
Senator Thorpe, we have about a minute before we have to take our next break, and I want to ask you about a press release in which you said the federal government is now on notice. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. The federal government need to walk the talk. They proposed a voice to Parliament, which in their view was about giving us a seat at the table. Well, they need to take the next step and allow truth-telling to happen across this country, and then entertain a treaty across this country. That's the only way we will ever mature as a nation and get rid of this element of racists or racism that we have to deal with every day.
Senator Lydia Thorpe joining us from Victoria, Australia. We're going to take another break. We're going to come back, and we have more to talk about with our guests, and we're going to bring another guest into the conversation as well, who joins us from Australia. A lot more to talk about here on the show with regard to this first treaty between Aboriginal people and the state of Victoria in Australia. The phone number to join our conversation, 1-800-996-2848.
Support for journalism that raises the awareness of child well-being to citizens and to policymakers provided by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, building a brighter future for children, families, and communities. Information at aecf.org.
Need an actionable plan to achieve your goals? Kaufman & Associates strengthens Native organizations through culturally grounded strategic planning. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
This is Native America Calling. We are focused on what is heralded as a promising step toward representation and reconciliation in Australia. One of the states in the country is finalizing a historic treaty with its Indigenous residents. You can join us. Call 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We have a fifth guest on the show, but before I introduce him, I do have one more question for Senator Lydia Thorpe, independent senator for Victoria and also representative of the Black Sovereign Movement. And Senator Thorpe, I'd like a little bit more detail on the treaty. Is there anything in the treaty that's not in there, not present, that you had hoped would be there?
Absolutely. We have marched and fought for a treaty that brings us justice. We want land back. This treaty doesn't include land back. It doesn't include justice. We have 24,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children that have been taken from their mothers' arms in this country. We have high incarceration rates, high suicide rates, and in so-called Victoria, they continue to sell off Crown land, which is meant to be treaty land. So by the time we go to negotiate, I'm not sure there's going to be much land left. And also under this Victorian government, they continue to desecrate our water, our land. They're locking up Aboriginal women at the highest rates ever before. So, yes, it's nice to have some education changes within the colony. But at the end of the day, genocide continues against our people. It's slow and sophisticated. And, yeah, that's what I'd like to see in a treaty. I know that people have worked hard to get the bit that we've got, which I do say are crumbs on the table. We do have a long way to go. I just want justice for my people, and I don't want our future generations to go through what our old people have gone through and what we continue to go through today.
Okay, Senator, thank you so much. 1-800-99-NATIVE. That is the number if you would like to join our conversation today here on Native America Calling. We've got the phone lines open. 1-800-99-NATIVE or 1-800-996-2848. We have another guest in Melbourne, in Victoria, Australia, Dr. Julian Wawiri Kusabs. He is a research fellow at the University of Melbourne. Julian, good morning. Welcome to the show. And please share with us which people you come from.
Hey, good morning, Sean. So I'm a bit different here in that I'm a Maori person. For the listeners who don't know, that's the first people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And my sort of iwi or tribal affiliations include Ngāti Tūwharetoa, Te Arawa, Ngāti Awa, Ngāti Maru ki Hauraki, and Tainui. But at the moment, as you specified, living on sort of lucky enough to live on beautiful Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
All right, thank you, Julian. Now, you study treaties, and they have a complex legacy here in the United States because of what Native Americans here often view as a lack of good faith and follow through by the federal government. How are they perceived in New Zealand, where you are from, and elsewhere?
Yes, so for those who haven't heard about it, New Zealand sort of has a very famous treaty called the Treaty of Waitangi that was signed in 1840 by the British Crown and a range of Maori rangatira, which is sort of the word for chiefs, which included across a wide range of iwi. It also included women chiefs signed the treaty as well. And I guess with that, I remember you sort of mentioned something that sounds like there's quite a parallel with the North American experience, being that the treaty is it's signed, it sort of promises a few particular things, but then often there's transgressions on that treaty from colonial governments, and from what I've heard and discussing it with people here. I feel like it's even sort of been indicated by the other guests on this program. A lot of the First Peoples of Victoria, First Peoples here are very sort of aware of that and cautious of that, and sort of are going to be looking into the future and know that it's sort of a long fight. Even though I think this is quite an important step, they know that sort of carrying through is going to be difficult because of I guess the colonial challenges that so many Indigenous peoples face around the world, even with treaty guarantees.
Sure. Now, what's so fascinating here is that the drafters of this treaty, they looked at agreements in places like New Zealand, where you're from, also Canada, the United States. What positive aspects of those treaties will hold promise in Australia now?
Well, I think, interestingly enough, I think at least one of the parallels I spot between the Treaty of Waitangi and I guess a key contextual difference is Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand was signed at 1840 prior to the former colony, while this is sort of being, sort of negotiated, agreed, and signed, and sort of after 100 and over 150 years into colonization. But I guess one parallel that I sort of see, and I think that's quite specific, is in the Maori version of the Treaty of Waitangi, because it was an English version, the Maori version, it was sort of guaranteed protections of this word called tonga, which sort of refers to treasures. And the interpretation of that word in terms of using guarantees has been used to protect a range of things, or at least allow Maori to allow us to sort of make claims and advocate for protecting a lot of aspects of our culture as treasures, for example. So, for example, in what's called the Waitangi Tribunal, they looked at basically classified the Maori language, which, due to assimilation and colonial pressure, declined in usage and fluency, and sort of Maori, we kind of used the Tonga classification to say that, there's certain things that count as treasures and protecting that. And I think even though there's sort of not the word treasure or Tonga obviously used in the, Australian context, in the Victorian context, in the Aboriginal context, there's plenty here in there about protecting very important things, whether that be law, cultural authority, art, songs, ceremony, dance, and stories. Also as people have sort of said, all these other aspects about self-determination, even about Indigenous data sovereignty, about fisheries are in there. I know that's also something that's sort of maybe parallel with the North American treaties. So there's that. So I guess to say that even though obviously their treaties, it comes from this historical context. I feel like this treaty is also very unique, especially in terms of the time, what it's sort of asking for, and also I think because the First Peoples of this land, of this country, have their own unique history of resistance, activism, advocating for things, advocating for what they want. So I think this treaty and this political context, even though it sort of connects with broader Indigenous strains of activism around the world. I mean, it mentions the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples multiple times. I still think it's its own unique, localized example. Coming from a unique history of survival.
Julian, what about potential pitfalls? What do Indigenous people need to be mindful of, perhaps cautious of, with regard to these contemporary treaty agreements we're talking about today?
Well, I think there's one thing that some of the other guests have sort of have touched on. I think is that, and I guess this is maybe where education comes in, and it's been a real theme, and is the one issue to deal with, and I think that is currently a significant issue back in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is that sort of misinformation, misunderstanding, ignorance, sort of bigotry, hostility that can come up towards obviously coming from a colonial history and from sort of history ongoing legacies and practices of racism, and sort of that sort of misrepresent what the treaty is about, what Indigenous rights are about, and that's something that's becoming quite difficult. Quite difficult to deal with is to sort of attempt to advocate for addressing and redressing injustices and trying to I think create these new arrangements when they're being sort of misrepresented. I think sort of one of the other guests, Senator Thorpe talked about how there's all the myths that sort of circulate around. Oh, they're going to be this land rights are a threat to your backyard, or things like that. And so I think in this kind of contemporary environment, and I mean I'm sure that listeners in North America can relate to that. Dealing with misinformation. I think about sort of these kind of political issues and social issues is quite difficult to try and branch across and get get that shared understanding that can actually lead to, I think, to that empathy and to approach addressing these issues in good faith and to respect the self-determination and the cultural survival and the social survival of Indigenous peoples and of the First Peoples in this land in particular.
Julian, listening to Senator Thorpe earlier, she mentioned some things that were not in the treaty, such as land back or some of the justice issues that are important. And for folks listening here in the States, oftentimes when we think of Native American treaties with the federal government, we think of land claims with regard to tribal lands that were stolen or tribal boundaries that need to be reaffirmed. We think of jurisdictional issues with regard to law enforcement and courts. We think of perhaps hunting and fishing rights. But what I'm hearing today is a treaty that doesn't include some of those types of issues. Some people might even think, well, this is really more of maybe an agreement or even like a more of an acknowledgement than a legal treaty. What's your thought on that? I mean, am I off here, or is this something that we need to think about as well?
Well, first off, I would absolutely agree that that land rights, especially for First Peoples here needs to go further. There's been so much dispossession and the consequences of that, and I think redressing that through land right, through land back is something that definitely definitely needs to happen. It's definitely an ongoing struggle. But I guess one thing that I would also bring attention to is because Australia was and the Australian colonies were unique in that they didn't have a treaty. While as you know, a lot of British colonies did, including New Zealand. It's kind of led to a different trajectory, different history of trying to address these issues. And in Australia, there is, and obviously it's been a complicated process filled with frustrations, like many Indigenous peoples face. But there is another, another mechanism called native title, where, and also all other kinds of avenues of land rights where. Across Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have sort of advocated and to try and sort of get the obviously get rights to the country that they've been deeply connected with for tens of thousands of years. And obviously, as I said, those mechanisms aren't perfect. There's been a lot of frustrations, of course. But I guess what I'm saying is that that even though this treaty is a part of it, and I think land rights should, obviously, yes, support land rights being deeply connected into this treaty, and being frustrating is, I think there's also a range of ways that across Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have, long fought for that land and will continue to fight for that land. And I mean, hopefully, treaty can, you know, can progressively contribute to that conversation and to that struggle. But yes, exactly. There's a lot of disappointment, and where this currently is, I think that's all understandable.
All right. Thank you, Julian. Senator Thorpe, I want to go back to you as we begin to wind down the show. Does the treaty give Indigenous people political power or a political status? Because political status, that is a term that Indigenous people in the United States that we very much relate to and understand.
Well, as I understand it, it gives a representative body, which we do have. I mean, at the moment we have nothing. Okay, so what we've got through this treaty right now, and yes, it's more of a administrative treaty rather than a rights-based or political rights-based treaty. It's not like the Treaty of Waitangi. It's not like other treaties around the world. So, as I understand it, it does set up a representative body. I do hope that that representative body is truly representative. We have as I said earlier, we do have a number of nations around what is now called Victoria. It's over 40 nations. They are currently not all represented at the Treaty Assembly, and that's something that I've advocated for the last 10 years. I was a member of the Victorian Parliament and passed the first treaty bill in Victoria as a Greens politician back then. And it was meant to be more representative than it is. So I'm hoping for more representation and this body to have real power, not just be an advisory body, which, as I understand, it is to provide advice to the Victorian government. We want power to be able to self-determine. We can't just be a ticker box on the side that provides advice. And going to Julian's comments around, yes, we have native title, but I just want to be clear to listeners, native title is not land rights. Native title only gives right to negotiate. It doesn't, we don't have veto over, if they want to destroy a waterways, they can do that. We don't have the veto to protect our land and our waters, and that's what must be in any treaty, that we have some kind of power to stop this destruction of land, water, and our people, and protect our babies so that they aren't taken away at the rate that they are. So we need more political power. We should have designated seats in Parliament that gives real power so that we can have real decision-making power in every jurisdiction in this country.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to have to wrap up this show. But I want to say thank you to all of our guests who allowed us to have what we consider a proper yarn here on Native America Calling today. Dr. Julian Wawiri Kusabs, Dr. Nikki Moody, Senator Lydia Thorpe, Travis Lovett, and Dr. Al Fricker. And I invite you all to join us again tomorrow for new music to add to your Native playlist. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show. Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com. Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.